Hey all, this is the outro voice jumping in to let you know that Ear Coffee is celebrating 7 years this fall with 4 local bands. We return to the legendary Cedar Cultural Center on the historic West Bank along with Malamiko, Kate Malanafi, Melanerpes, and Bugsy on September 6th. Tickets are on sale now at thecedar.org. Advanced tickets are $18 or $23 the day of. We work hard every year to book bands that are important to the history of Ear Coffee, and this bill is no different. Join us Friday, September 6th at the Cedar Cultural Center for Ear Coffee's 7th birthday show. Ticket link is in the show notes.
What's up, everyone? My name is Aly, and you're listening to the Ear Coffee Podcast. For this week's episode, we welcomed Minneapolis songwriter and multi-instrumentalist Bryn Battani onto the show. She recently released her latest EP, Guest Room, a 5-song walkthrough of anxiety, being your own person, and sleeping on the floor. We talked about chamber pop, Texas, feeling rootless and taking control, and more. Without further ado, here's my interview with Bryn Battani on the Ear Coffee Podcast. How are you doing this Monday at 7? I don't know why I almost said the time. We don't need to dox ourselves here.
It's at 7, everybody.
Yeah. Really in case important. You wanted to know that.
The critical time.
Yeah.
It is kind of important because I have been trying to not schedule things before that because my job is currently kind of all over the place in terms of when I am done. And I am trying to do better at time management, which I have music about. So that's why it's relevant.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we get into anything further, I want to hear a little introduction just in your words, kind of not like an overview of the music. We'll get into the details, but just a little introduction.
Yeah, about my background or this project specifically or whatever.
What's your role in the project? Just really the basic kind of bullet pointed facts, and then we'll get into all the details like the background and the music itself.
Yeah, I guess a little bit about how I started writing music and such. I come from a musical theater background, which I feel like shows itself in my writing, and grew up figuring out accompaniments for lyrics on piano. Definitely always been a lyrics-centered writer, and this project definitely evolved through the ragtag DIY studio process through which it was created. So the arrangements that they turned out to be were built in a lot of unexpected and improvisatory ways, which was also fun to have that happen at the same time as I moved here to Minneapolis and started forming a band here and translating the skeletal versions of these songs into live band arrangements, which are actually pretty different in some cases than the recordings. So yeah, I guess my songwriting is generally harmonic and lyric focused, but I love writing arrangements for all different kinds of sounds and textures. I call my project chamber pop because I lean towards strings, winds, horns. This project has
there's a lot of auxiliary melodies and instrumentation going on beyond just kind of like the core, like rock band or like folk rock, and kind of just the guitar, drums, bass. There's a lot of I blanked on the word, but just a lot of fun sounds coming and going.
Yeah, I like having those type of instruments play the role of sort of different characters or like elements in a setting or an atmosphere. My writing is pretty narrative driven, so it sort of aligns with that sensibility as well as this like musical theater storytelling thing that I tend to do.
Yeah, going from musical theater, because that is one thing, and then did you start writing songs kind of right away as soon as you kind of caught the spark of just being involved in music, singing, performing, just all of the things that have come with that and whatnot? Or was it a little bit more gradual? Just talk a little bit about how, because this is we're talking about your third EP, so you've been writing for at least a few years, several years now, if not a while before that with different project unreleased things. We don't see what goes on before the links hit the internet or the CDs make it out to market and whatnot. Just talk a little bit about your introduction and kind of your first dives into songwriting and arranging and all the things that you've made part of your sound and your process now.
Yeah, it's always been a way of processing the world for kind of forever in some way or another. Particularly big feelings and uncomfortable feelings. I think anytime that something happens to me personally, or I'm observing something in the world that is just making me uncomfortable and I don't know what to do with, that is the sort of thing that moves me to write. So in some form or another, it's been happening. I was very self-conscious about it and didn't really share my songs with people until high school. And then I had the awesome privilege of going to Interlochen in Michigan for a year of my senior year of high school, where I got to focus on songwriting in the woods with a bunch of other artists for a year, in addition to being a high school student. So I definitely grew a lot in that year. Particularly I think that's where I learned how awesome collaboration is. We had to do so much different we approached co-writing in so many different ways. And there was a time where I was like, I just have to be lone wolf. I don't know how to communicate my ideas to other people in a way where we can actually make something together. But it opened up so many ideas of different ways to approach it that I've continued to explore, particularly since I've moved here. So that was one really influential part of my musical past, I guess. And then I went to college. I studied English and music. It was COVID. I didn't get to perform much. And I was not surrounded by that many other musicians, I would say. But so Hang Your Clothes, which was my last EP, was sort of also DIY, remotely cobbled together thing. So this year in Minneapolis is the first time I've had really a semblance of a band. And even still, it's not really a band because the members are not nailed down at the moment. It's been different people cycling in and out depending on availability. We'll see where that goes. That might change, but I also do love how fresh it is every time, and lets me have a little more control to try out different things every time.
Yeah. Comparing, we're just thinking back to when you were still living in Austin and writing those first EPs and first songs, specifically just with the kind of rotating cast of collaborators and people that have played on each of the EPs and play maybe on a song-by-song basis, the different sounds and instruments that you're playing with and arranging with. What has been that process of kind of being the center of gravity for a group of other people? It's still very collaborative, but you've written the bones, you've written lyrics, you're kind of directing the idea, and in this case, with your own songs, compare that to going and playing in other people's bands, playing on other people's songs.
This project, I would say, is the one I've had the most control over. My first EP was totally spoiled me because I worked with a friend and mentor of mine in Austin, two of them, in fact, Curtis McMurtry and Diana Burgess, whose music I had admired a ton as a kid and continue to. And we did it nicely in a studio. I guess it was a little weird because it was COVID summer of 2020. So we were distancing and masking in the studio, but it was very quick and efficient, and we knew how we were going to go about it. And because they co-produced it with me and had prior studio experience, it was like a very well-oiled machine to just kind of have some nice polished versions of songs that I had written in high school, basically. And because my goal through that project was just to kind of document that. And I feel like always the drive is I want to document this thing that is very of its time for me, and then I want to move on, which this EP, that I'm releasing now, Guest Room, has gone on so much longer than I wanted it to. It really was sort of I just need to process some bad feelings project that I just took further than I expected to. And now I'm tossing it out into the world finally. But sorry, what was I saying about Oh yeah, so that one I was like explicitly first EP, All I Have to Offer You Is Anything You Want, was explicitly co-produced with some musicians that I knew had creative tastes that aligned with mine, but I was not calling all of the shots with that. And I was also just working with a pretty specific time and budget. And then Hang Your Clothes was also a sort of accidental, hey, we've got access to the school recording studio. You know how to use this stuff. I want to learn more about this. I've also got these songs to make. Like, let's make this thing about also some feelings about, I had been recently diagnosed with ADHD, which was a super long time coming. And I was sort of like processing what it's like to be like an undiagnosed neurodivergent kid and trying to understand how you fit into things. And so with that one, it was my songs and I was writing arrangements and coming up with ideas, but I didn't have a super clear idea of a lot of things going into it, and it just sort of evolved. And then it got finished while I was actually living in Prague for a semester, and there were some behind the scenes sort of dramatic complications with that EP, but I had to like redo some parts or didn't have some things I was expecting to. So like the drums on that one, I was just not there in the room at all. That was just a friend of mine recording with the person that I had recorded the rest of it with in Austin. And I was like, I just wanted to get it done. So if I redid that project, I would have rather been in the room and more involved. But I do also like to leave a lot of space for input from other people, because I tend to be pretty sure of what I want with some things harmonically and lyrically and sort of structurally. But there's a lot of things that I'm open to. And the more I've worked with people who play instruments that I don't play, the more I believe that there's certain elements of that process that they're just gonna they're gonna have more varied and potentially better ideas than me, because I just don't have that hands-on relationship with the thing that they're making sounds with. So figuring out that balance of how to communicate something and give them enough specificity for them to work off of, but then leave things open to them. So actually in the arrangements for Guest Room, there's a lot of like the solo section that happens towards the end of Dicey, between the fiddle and the trumpet, I wrote "Throw a Tantrum." So my notation is more literary than standard musical notation a lot of the time.
No, some like that's almost more helpful than just like, hey, here's the chords. You have this many measures. That gives you headspace. That's obviously so important, but it's more than that, and gives them an idea of kind of the tone and what headspace to put themselves in. Which with especially solo sections where it's meant to be more improvisatory and focused on one voice, just kind of how to dictate the tone of a certain sound or instrument can be really important. And I feel like that's something that one learns by being a collaborator, as well as by going through the process of, and quote unquote, being more in charge. Like, especially with those first two EPs and how those processes kind of sounds like they helped you figure out kind of how you wanted to approach things and give you a little more of a grounded footing before going in with Guest Room, which sounds like it was, it had a little bit more, not more intentionality, but obviously you were here in Minneapolis, you're here in Minnesota, and everything was able to happen in the room, and that kind of fueled the process.
Yeah, well, I mean, yes and no. I did actually record most of it in Austin.
Oh, you did? Okay.
So the timeline of it was I went home for spring break last year in a just real sour mood about some stuff, and I was itching to learn how to mix. I was like, I am very tired of feeling like I can't be as involved in this as I want to be, and that these I don't know, there were other voices in my life speaking loudly in terms of like control over music things. I was like, I want to figure out how to have more influence and control of this area of recording. So I just went into a friend's studio space with some people that really did not know the song, which was rough because this first one was You Don't Think, which has a couple of weird timing things and whatnot. But we figured it out. We laid something down. And then I mixed those stems. That is not the version that you hear because I don't actually know how to do it that nicely. It was more of a learning experience for me. Yeah. And I wanted to do that without feeling any pressure about what was going to happen or like what the end result was going to be. So Buckley, who was the one who recorded it, ended up mixing that one. And then 2 other songs, which were The Thing and Dicey, I recorded, I think it was like a day or 2 before I moved to Minneapolis in September. It was also sort of chaotic. I had it planned out more or less for a couple of weeks with some friends. And then, the 2 rhythm section people both got COVID. So I found last minute replacements for that because I was like, well, I would reschedule this, but I am actually moving in like 2 days. So I really had a fire to document those before moving on. And I had this vision that I was going to like immediately just finish them and then put them out. And then I'll move to Minneapolis and have like fresh things for people to hear. And here I am, it's like 8 months later and I'm finally releasing it. But I think it's definitely better for that. And then I did get more Minneapolis people involved after the fact, including Nathaniel Gillen, who ended up mixing the rest of it. So Buckley did the first one. That was definitely, that's an example of something that was not intentional about the project, and that's just how it happened. And if I were to do it all again, there are things I would keep more consistent, or I would be more intentional about what kind of space I recorded things in. But I was just throwing and going with a lot of stuff because frankly, it just felt so like emotionally urgent and I just wanted to make it now.
Yeah, no, you're always learning and always kind of figuring these things out while still taking advantage of the moment, whether it's, like you literally have a deadline, like I am leaving this state and uprooting my life in this huge way in a couple days and the fire's kind of here, or just here's, as you even just play with the same folks and kind of have a cast of collaborators that, or like as the folks that you've brought in for your live band, and just as you settle into a groove with them just for performing, you grow as a musician and but you also grow as as an ensemble. And I think kind of melding those two things is a weird thing to wrap your head around. Especially now that it's 8 months later and the EP is finally out and it's kind of taking that final step before moving on to whatever's next.
The one like in the room moment that was intentional or intentionally left open, I guess, was the outro solo thing on The Thing. Because that was also part of the urgency of I want to record something before I move from Austin, because I had this friend, Liam Lord, who plays trumpet, who I had reconnected with from high school. And then Gabriela Torres from Large Brush Collection. They're one of my favorite Austin bands. And she's just this like incredibly energetic player who I knew she would be really comfortable improvising, as well as Liam. So I was like envisioning that this song would have this chaotic, fluttery, like flurry of frustrated energy releasing at the end. And I was like, I think that would be pretty cool if I just told them to go at it. And I didn't give them much instruction at all. And that was just like a one take thing. That song was just, Liam came up with that like little funk horn line, because of course he did, because that's the kind of music that he plays usually. And then Gabby like filled some little spots. And if I did it again, I like to be more intentional about my arrangement. So I maybe would write out something more specific for them to do. And that's something now in my band with Josh Peterson on violin and Zach Miller on saxophone. We definitely are increasingly, as we have time, focusing on creating parts between them for them to like play in unison or harmonize, or like tightening that up. So it's not just like random improvised fills or whatever, but in the recording, that's what it was. And that's what I wanted it to be. Yeah.
Thinking kind of across the whole EP's creation and as songs were first kind of germinating, it was very narrative based, like you're saying. That traces all the way back to kind of how songs function in musicals, albeit in your own style. A lot of the lyrics and stories in the songs feel very drawn from life, very detail focused, while still like the song as a whole is kind of reckoning with a broader emotion or a more intense emotion. Has that always been kind of what you've been drawn to as a songwriter? Has that changed as you've, just had more experience writing songs, putting them out there, which is a whole nother step from just writing the lyrics and writing the songs and, again, keeping them locked away. But yeah, how has that grown, or has that changed? If you maybe come more into focus, if you have a way that's kind of become apparent.
Yeah, that has always been kind of my bit as a songwriter, like the very specific personal narrative thing, because frankly, that's just easiest and it comes first and it always feels most urgent. I feel I'm usually drawn to songs with specific imagery, and it always just comes easiest when I experience it and notice it. I feel like I collect stuff from other people too, but writing is interesting. Like, I think there's some writers who really like the inventing a narrative part of it, like the coming up with a character and a plot and a scene. But I'm sort of more interested in the telling part, like what words do you use and what double meanings or multiple interpretations can you create for people, and the playing with language part of it. So it's kind of just easier to work from a narrative that happened to me, because I've got the specific details, like the blanket embroidered with your name, or the coffee at the airport, or whatever else.
Really
I feel like,
actually
every song is full of pretty specific things that all mean something to me. And I by no means expect a listener to come away from this EP with some sort of complete understanding of the messy relationships behind them. But hopefully those little things, can be connected with in various ways by people.
Yeah, you're not trying to just like share a blow by blow of this particular time in your life or an event. You're drawing things from that to create a song and create something more that goes beyond just being these little details, but still using those as colors in your palette, which is I think a good use of those little things you kind of pick up along the way. It's like, this stands out so much in your mind. Well, I'll put this in a song, even if it's, something you just kind of see as you're walking along or driving down the highway, or something you directly live through. Do you think your environments have really affected your mindset around your music? Like, does it feel distinct, or is it becoming distinct when you think of how you were working and all the things you were doing when you were in Austin, and now that you've moved and settled in Minnesota a bit more? Is it felt more continuous, or has there been kind of a clear shift, or the inklings of a shift since you haven't been here that long? But you at least have the live band putting out new music. It's official.
Yeah. Oh, it's official. I have an ID now, which took way too
nice.
long. But I am a Minnesotan.
Hell yeah.
And I did make an account for my energy to pay for my cooking gas, which apparently I never did.
They don't tell you that you're supposed to, but
it was like some little thing in the lease that somehow got skipped over. It was like, cooking gas. Well, on that note, honestly, I think that I feel some sort of shift about to happen in my writing. I frankly haven't been writing much at all. I've done some collaborative stuff, but more of my effort has been put into figuring out the gig situation and how to share stuff with people here and have a presence live. And also I've joined 2 other bands and done a lot of other like one-off things. So It's been heavy, like playing and just like getting out into the world and seeing what's going on, and not so much the reflecting, like looking in. But I feel that that's about to happen a lot. And I'm going to very intentionally make some space for it after this release show this Sunday. And I think that it is going to be influenced by my environment in the sense of I am out of college and I am trying to learn how the real world works and observing all kinds of uncomfortable things that I'm feeling moved to write about. So I, in some ways, maybe like being in college and growing up, like it was I had like the privilege to be really in my head about my emotions and relationships and whatever, because that felt like urgent and present, as well as like the ADHD diagnosis journey and whatever. But yeah, I feel like just navigating our fun capitalist reality is not specific to Minneapolis, but is specific to where I am in life right now. And that's going to start taking the stage a little more soon.
Like the locale in life and kind of where you're at it has ended up mattering more than like this, like the physical geography.
I think something that's important to what is at the core of Guest Room is that sort of lack of being planted anywhere, because this whole EP centers around this uncomfortable, out of place feeling that you might get when you're staying in someone's guest room, where you're not in your own space, not quite at home, not close to them, kind of held at an arm's reach, and just not fully able to feel comfortable where you are. And the songs got written, like, I guess You Don't Think and Solo, I both wrote while I was living in Prague. Solo was very influenced by living in Prague and being a continent away from the person that I wanted to be with, and the time change and just making terrible decisions to talk all night and not sleep. And also it was winter, and it was definitely a song that, like, I felt like it's clear to me that I wrote it in a room that wasn't really mine. And then Dicey, I started writing on a bus ride home from the night that inspired it. So that was quite literally like an in transition song, which is where I got that train beat going from. And then Weighted Blanket, I'm talking about being at an airport and traveling a long distance, going really out of my way to be with someone. And then The Thing took a very long time to evolve. And in fact, I've been playing a version of it that is not even remotely the same song. But that was like the first draft where I used the lyrics about being not the thing. That song is like maybe the longest evolution process I've ever experienced. And so that, like, starting in Minnesota and then working on it when I went home from Austin, and that it just like taking on a totally different life now playing it live also feels very like unstable and not grounded. So I'm glad that it at least seems cohesive. I think it works as a cohesive project because that through line conceptually is very there for me, even if the recording process was sort of all over the place, quite literally.
Yeah, the through line is the kind of sense of physical and emotional displacement and just kind of being, like you said, in transit, whether that's like literally on a bus or just, being physically somewhere else. Do you think there's a moment that specifically encapsulates the EP as a whole and everything that you have been going for musically or lyrically? Do you think there's like a good representative, like a little synecdoche kind of the whole thing, where just one, it could change day by day, because that's kind of how one's own relationship, I feel, at least I imagine, one's relationship with their own art goes. But what's kind of one of the defining moments that you kind of feel honed towards or drawn towards now that you've been able to kind of reflect on it a bit? It's like the EP will be out in under a week from recording this, which is, a very different place from when you're in the midst of creating it.
That's such an interesting question. So I guess Weighted Blanket, which is going to be one of the new songs to the world this Friday, is probably the most real and actually vulnerable. That song also evolved a lot in some very weird ways. That's completely torn up from this song that I wrote like pretty immediately after the breakup situation that inspired it. And it was the sort of like upbeat pop song that had this chorus about like talking on the phone. I have no idea what I was thinking with that. It's just, I guess I wasn't thinking about it. It's something that came out. And then after I recorded Dicey and The Thing, I was like, okay, I'll have You Don't Think First and then solo will be cool after that. And I was thinking about this order and this progression, and I was like, I need some like short little thing. Maybe it's just an instrumental interlude or like some a cappella thing, maybe some harmony thing in between Dicey and The Thing. And then I was like, wait, I wrote that other song and the verses to that were kind of heavier than the song sounded. Let me like sit with that a little bit more. And actually on a plane, yeah, wrote that version of it. So that's the most real song. There's a lot of facade being put up in the EP, particularly with Dicey. That's kind of the whole thing I'm playing with in that song is like, haha, this is a lighthearted song about how I'm like totally over this thing. But there are hopefully moments in the song that call that into question. And that is actually another moment of the EP that I do really appreciate how it turned out is the end of Dicey after the throw a tantrum section. There's kind of a weird chord change and like a mellow part where I'm repeating "You're Not Holding Me," which is another like real sad moment, hopefully. And there's this little bass lick that Augie added in that Matthew Zyla has been playing live, and I just really enjoy that there's just like a little bit of space there for me to be real and for you to actually hear the bass do something cool for once. I try to leave space for bass appreciation in my music.
Always, is a safe space for bass appreciators.
So I guess like while this EP maybe doesn't really sound like it's not dark and heavy all the way through. It's like there's plenty of upbeat like brightness to it. But the like little moments where I try to give a window into like the real emotional weight of it, I think are actually what speaks more.
Yeah. And those are like, kind of like the things that reveal themselves with like after spending time with the songs or by just listening, being with them. Because you know they're still catchy, you can sing along, but then something like kind of catchy if you're like, oh, that's way realer than I maybe initially thought. And it just then that sticks with you, and kind of putting those moments throughout the songs and just finding them yourself is always an interesting and hopefully fascinating and cool part of this whole thing we do.
Also, there's one moment of distortion in the whole thing, and it is right at the end before that flurry solo section in the outro of The Thing. I go, it's not that I'm not the thing. And then there is this like chord change, and there is a guitar distortion moment that Nathaniel added that I really appreciated. And we were talking throughout the process of producing it of like, I kept using the word angst to describe stuff. And he's like, is that really like, I don't know if this sounds angsty. Like this isn't crunchy sounding or like super gritty. It's all like pretty clean-ish acoustic instruments. And I was like, just wrestling with what does angst mean and what does that sound like? But that is the one single moment of distortion, and I'm glad that it's there.
Yeah. Really letting the angst fly. Thinking not just about Guest Room, but about just how your creative approach in kind of across all different contexts and locations. What's something that you've either always loved or come to love about your own personal approach and process, and what you can bring to a song and what you want to bring to a song? Like what, like looking inward, and what's something that you have are just appreciative of and that you are proud of, maybe?
I love this question and your last one because, quite frankly, I have felt some like weird negative feelings around releasing this. Like, of course, there's always the creative thing of your taste is gonna exceed your abilities, and also like these songs I wrote like over the past year and a half, like they're not what I would write now, and it's not how I would record it and produce it now, and then it's been hard for me a little bit to actually like feel good and proud of it. So I love that you're having me actually reflect on what I do appreciate. I think that I just love playing with language, which I don't know that that's shared by all musicians. In fact, I know it's not. And I firmly believe that it, like any music with lyrics, deserves to have good lyrics. It can be a pop song that's very sort of generic and open and whatever, but
a little bit more ephemeral. Yeah.
You like, there's still no genre of music in my book like gets off free like not having thoughtful, intentional lyrics, or like, okay, and maybe not intentional, because I do think that it always depends on what it is, but whatever. I love thinking about what does a song need lyrically, or like, I guess my process is usually I have lyrics and melody, or like the lyric and melody and arrangement part are all linked, and it's like how do I express this idea kind of all together? But I guess lyrics usually kind of take the priority, whereas like in some of my co-writing stuff, I'm writing lyrics over a chord progression someone else has written, or editing lyrics of an existing song, which is a cool thing that I've been doing lately with Samuel Wilbur, who's another local artist. And I can't turn off the like very analytical editing part of my brain that just like loves thinking about like, what are all the different word choices here? Which one would sound nicest? Is there any opportunity for like fun internal rhymes or consonants or a double meaning? Or I just love, and sometimes it's problematic. I mean, maybe not problematic, but it definitely slows down the process. But I don't really care, because I can just really delight in like all the endless possibilities of language. I like bringing that to music, and I hope that I can continue to do that with other collaborators, since I feel like that's something unique that I bring, and continue to explore it myself and bring other people who have more specific relationships to a part of music that I don't, like their instrument. For example, have them in on my lyric process.
Yeah, no, it's very important to enjoy, or at least try to enjoy the process of creating, if and when we can, because a lot of the times it turns into, it is hard work, but when you can find those moments of just kind of getting stuck on one line, just trying out all the different possibilities and see what comes to you, see what might feel cool and fun and interesting in the moment, and letting yourself be fully interested in experiencing that, versus like when you're on a deadline and you don't or aren't able to allow yourself that kind of time. So that's really cool. As we near the end of the interview, I always like to ask folks about what bands or what artists they would just want to recommend, shout out, that they think more people should know about, whether it's someone that you've just been listening to the music of and really enjoy it, or someone that's had been closer in the fold, or even folks back from Austin, from across the country, from just shouting out some recommendations, sharing just sharing new music, hopefully with people.
Yeah. Well, I already said Large Brush Collection, Austin band. I shouted them out in another interview recently. Nora Predley's bass playing is so cool, and so she does vocals and these just like super cool picky bass arrangements, and then Gabby plays flute, and the rest of the ensemble is really fantastic. They bring this minimalism factor that I've been really drawn to recently. Some like influences behind my writing and stuff, always Andrew Bird, particularly his last album, or yeah, I guess it was his. Wow, he's been releasing like jazz stuff now. Whatever. His last album that I've listened to, Inside Problems. It has this really minimalist arrangement style, where there's just like maybe like 5 instruments or whatever in each one, and like the parts are just like really nicely put together, but then there's also a lot of like space for kind of like wild, out of control sounds. Like his violin playing style is just super cool and unnerving in a way that I love. So if you don't know Andrew Bird, he's my favorite ever. And yeah, I don't know that I necessarily accomplished that same sort of minimalism thing in this project, but it was there to some extent. Yeah, and I've been listening to so much local stuff recently. I will say Humbird's most recent record, Right On, also really scratches that minimalist itch for me. I just got to hear her play it at Turf Club last weekend, and it was really fantastic. And I knew that it was going to be fantastic, even though I was like not sure how it was going to sound compared to the record, because the songs and the arrangements are just so solid on their own that whether you translate them in one environment or another, it's going to hold up, and it absolutely did. So yeah, I guess that's my Twin Cities recommendation.
Yeah,
of the moment. There's so many more.
I always find, and it's just, you could keep on going for maybe double the duration of the rest of the interview, just listing off cool local artists or smaller artists from certainly Minneapolis. That's where we're in Minnesota. That's where we're focused on, but wherever there's an abundant and robust kind of musical community, and that's one of the coolest things we get to see from the interviewer side and from kind of looking in. Cool. So this has all been about Guest Room, which is available now. By the time you're listening, at the very least, we're still relishing in the anticipation at this current moment. But beyond just plugging the new EP and hopefully encouraging folks to go listen to it, where else can people find you? What else have you been up to, looking forward to? I know you mentioned you've been playing with some other bands, and just, yeah, where can people best find and support you and your work?
Yeah, I'll still be playing shows around the Twin Cities, with some iteration of some sort of band or myself. And then I am in a band called Dog Gam that I never know how to describe, and I keep meaning to talk to the other members about how the hell I should be marketing us, because they have existed for a couple of years, and I just recently joined on keys and accordion, which is a new instrument adventure for me.
Yeah.
Their music is very fun. Lots of like surprising, weird changes in time or key, and we are always having fun. And yeah, so you can definitely find us playing around the Twin Cities. I also currently play in folk project called Saint Rangers, and yeah, I'm curious to see how this is gonna evolve for now, as I try to make more space for writing again. But yeah, I would definitely want to do more co-writing, more collaborative things. I love seeing how I can in some way help someone else see out their project or help imagine it in some way. So if you're looking to do that, I love like playing a producer role to whatever extent, and just like thinking through the process. The creative process is just across mediums and disciplines, just like the most endlessly interesting thing to me. So yeah, I just want to learn more about how that works for other people and be part of it if I can.
Cool. Thanks so much for your time. It was great talking to you. Again, the new EP is called Guest Room. Yeah, thanks again.
Thank you.
You have been listening to the Ear Coffee Podcast. If you like what you heard, please rate, review, and share so we can stand out against the sea of other music podcasts. You can find information and other important links, including tickets for our upcoming birthday show, in the show notes of this episode. If you would like to support us, please consider subscribing on Patreon for early access to live sessions and other bonus content. You can also subscribe to our Substack for a regular newsletter with reviews, ramblings, and anything else we have to say. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.